The population of Israel in the War of Independence was only 600,000 Jews, which means what percentage of the country died? 1%. What would that be in America? 3.3 million people. Which, by the way, talking about what happened, they talk about to understand. This is not really this topic historically, but it's just a good background to understand that Israel is a very small country. It's like one giant family. Live here long enough. I've been to a bunch of funerals because I know a bunch of people were killed on October 7th. Some of them were civilian people. I know someone killed the Nova Festival, and one of my close friends' son was the commander of the Nachal Brigade. And Yoni, I know him since he's 10 years old. He was 42-year-old father of 6, killed at Nachal Oz defending, with his soldiers. So Memorial Day this year is going to be the heaviest Memorial Day since the Yom Kippur War, when 2,500 Israeli soldiers died. But it's they say to explain this to America, one Israeli is the equivalent of 50. One Israeli dying is equivalent of 50 Americans dying. Now think about it. There's 25,000 people have died fighting in Israel's wars since 1948 until today. Now it's about 25,000. It's a little bit less, but with the current war, it's certainly at that number now. That's the equivalent of 1.3 million American soldiers dying, which is more than twice as many soldiers have died, including World War I until the present. Isn't that an amazing statistic? So it's like a very important thing to understand. So to have 1% of your population killed in the War of Independence. And the War of Independence, by the way, if you look back on the map here, you can see that look on the map on the left. You can see the black area is originally what was in our control. That was more or less what was supposed to be the indefensible, teeny tiny Jewish state, which, by the way, is 9 miles wide. You see where it says Netanya? To Kalkilia. Ranan is right below that. Israel is 9 miles wide. If you project Greater LA, because we both have a West Coast, they have a left coast. We have a West Coast. If you put Santa Monica on here and you go to the left, Greater LA goes past Amman, Jordan. To show how small Israel is, it's like a really teeny little country. But you could see when the War of Independence, it was basically 5 Arab armies versus Israel. It was on and off fighting. We did remarkably well, given that Israel had no tanks, no air force, the first 3 fighter planes in the Israeli Air Force, ironically, Steven Spielberg's sister made a movie out of this, with 3 Messerschmitt 109 German fighters. Isn't that great? I love that. One of them came in pieces smuggled into the country, and one of them was not usable, so they scavenged it for parts. And these 2 fighter planes, the first Jewish planes up in the sky, which strafed the Egyptian army coming up from the south through Gaza and stopped them. They thought, the Israelis have an air force. We got to run away. Were 2 German fighter planes. Wonder how Hitler would think about that one. Anyway, go read the book The Pledge by Leonard Slater. This is a book that Rabbi Noach Weinberg Zatzal would tell you have to read. Leonard Slater, The Pledge. It's about all the Jews in the world put their differences aside. There was no if not now, when, and peace now morons running around, like self-hating Jews hiding, wearing keffiyehs and screaming on university campuses back then. Everyone and anyone, even all the Jews in organized crime, were involved in making sure that Israel was not nipped at the bud when it was born, smuggling weapons in. Mayor Lansky, who was working with the Italians in organized crime, got the Italians who controlled the Teamsters, who loaded the ships because there was an arms embargo in the Middle East. And the Arabs had plenty of weapons and Israel had none. We got all the stuff smuggled in anyway, illegally. It was such a cool story. The power of the Jewish people when we are united is unbelievable. And that's one of the best examples, that story, of how powerful Jewish unity is. And we survived that war and did pretty well, except in one place. If you look on the map, we lost Jerusalem. On May 28th, remember the War of Independence starts on May 14th. May 28th, 1948, the Jewish quarter surrenders to the Jordanian army. We now know that Ben Gurion made a decision not to try and keep the old city. It would be too difficult and too costly. So Jerusalem remained a divided city for 19 years. And if you look on the map here, you can then see what's in the white here. In the end of that war, we end up with look at how much more territory we end up with. Israel gets triples its territory, because especially in the south, the Negev, the last major military operation is taking Eilat, which is down at the Gulf of Aqaba, giving Israel a port down into the Red Sea over here. But all this was not supposed to be part of a Jewish state. So we did pretty well. But Jordan illegally crossed its international border, you see on the map over here, and not only controlled the old city, but everything like a giant number 8 over here, south of us down to Hebron and further south, and north going all the way up to Jenin, yuck, which is the cesspool of terrorism in Israel, today was all Jordanian controlled. Notice there was no Arab uprisings then, because the Arabs know how to deal with Arab uprisings, which is what? I kill you. Exactly. They're not. And when people of color kill other people of color, we see this whether it's in Chicago on the weekend or in the Middle East, in Syria. Certain people not of color don't really care about it. That was my political commentary. Okay, so it's an interesting side point. But the Jordanians ended up for 19 years occupying all that territory, which is not legally theirs. There was no UN resolutions. And the Egyptians ended up occupying Gaza, which was not legally theirs. And believe me, Israel would happily give it back to Egypt now. Egypt doesn't want it because everyone wants the land. No one wants the Palestinians. Okay, let's get back to our timeline, guys. We got to get through here. Okay, let's go through. So War of Independence, which is missing from the timeline, I know is got accidentally deleted, ends in 1949. You see, here it is, the armistice. See it over here? There's several armistices signed. It says armistice with Egypt. There's no peace treaty. An armistice is a ceasefire agreement. There's no formal borders established in an armistice, which means the dividing line, which was right outside the old city. Outside the old city was no man's land. The end of Mamilla Mall was basically deserted with a giant concrete sniper barrier. Next time you go up to City Hall, you know City Hall, top of the old city, that curved building at the top? Walk along the right side of the streets of Jaffa Road where the light rail is, and you get past the first building. Turn the corner around, there's some really cool photographs on the wall of City Hall right there on Jaffa Road, right by the light rail stop of the border, with all the buildings used to be there. It's really, really cool. And they used to be where the old city is. There was a buildings hiding the old city walls. It's also the site of what is one of the UN's greatest accomplishments. The UN has done three useful things, in my opinion. One was voting to partition Palestine November 29, 1947. Two was sending troops to Korea. And in 1956, a Jewish woman in the Notre Dame Hospice, that beautiful building that's lit up at night, that French Catholic hospice, top of the old city, leaned out the window and her false teeth fell into no man's land, and the UN rescued her teeth. I can show you in Life magazine. I have the photographs on my phone of this. If they had just stopped at that, they would have had a better batting average. But anyway, but here you have the armistice. So Jerusalem is the divided city. Jordanians occupying here. Look, it says July 20, 1949, the end of the war officially, which starts on May 14th, 1948. So it's over a year off and on fighting. Okay, May 11th, by the way, as soon as Israel declares itself a state, the U.S., which was telling Israel not to do it, immediately recognizes Israel, jumps in right away. They do decide. Truman, who's, by the way, business partner, was a Jewish guy. He used his influence with Truman. Truman recognizes the United States. And Russia, by the way, voted for Israel, hoping that Israel become what? Communist, socialist, right? We invented communism. Why not be a communist state since we invented the idea? As Karl Marx, Anyway, but it didn't work out that way, and then Russia didn't become so positive towards us. You look at May 11th, 1949, Israel made it to the United Nations. June 1949, okay, major immigration wave begins from where? Remember, the Holocaust did not make it to the Middle East very much. North Africa, a few Jews were killed. The Germans got a hold of Morocco for a while. Vichy was set up there. The Vichy French puppet government was there. But basically, it's overwhelmingly an experience of Europe. But between 1948 and 1967, about 850,000 Jews, many of whom had been living literally more than 1,000 years before Islam even came into existence, in places like Iraq, which was not originally an Arab country. It's Babylon. And Babylonians, who are not around anymore, were not Arabs. All these Jews were ethnically cleansed from the Middle East. Places like Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, the wealthy North African Jews, where did they go to? They went to France. All the Jews in France, the Ashkenazim, were all long since assimilated. They're all much of Moroccans and Algerians who were living in France today. Or they went to Côte Saint-Luc in Montreal, which is the most Jewish city in the world. You know that? 98% Jewish. All Moroccan. They have great couscous there. I highly recommend it. Anyway, anyone from Côte Saint-Luc? Any Montrealans? Okay, no one here. Okay. Anyway, but this is an important thing. It's always left behind. But the difference is during this fighting, and I don't want to go into this whole topic, but we know that a combination of things led to a lot of the Arabs living here, leaving the country. One is people tend to clear out of war zones. Two is a lot of the Arab commanders of armies said, you're in the way, step aside so we can push the Jews into the Mediterranean, slaughter, and then you can come back and pillage everything and take over their houses and their territory. And three is there is definitely places where Israel drove Arabs out, especially in places where Arabs were attacking Jews from, like all those little communities on the Jerusalem-Tel Aviv highway where Motza is and places like that in Castel, which today are all Jewish, but at the time were Arab villages, even Harnof, which is actually, Harnof is the famous Deir Yassin. Everyone have to look up Deir Yassin, where we supposedly massacred Arabs. Almost certainly not true, but when they first built Harnof, and you told Arab drivers, cab drivers, I knew what's in the The hard milk goes, aywa, der yasin, you know. So those were cleared out because they were used as launching points for attacks against us, like we're doing in Rafah now. May we do it soon in our days. I'm looking for the Chumas Eliyahu in Rafah in the Beit Chabad. It'll be great. It'll be awesome. I spent months of my life exactly where the army is in the Philadelphia car. I spent so many months there in Miluim when we used to control that point. Anyway, but I have no idea. W.C. Fields got to name it. I don't know. It's a good question. I don't know. It's not W.C. Fields didn't name it. He hated Philadelphia. He said, one night I spent a week in Philadelphia. But on his tombstone, it says, all things considered, I'd rather be in Philadelphia. Anyway, but guys, but you have to understand the Arabs, there's definitely Arabs start leaving and more leave after 67 because the territory that Jordan occupies, then Israel takes over and Arabs flee from there also. The difference is the Arabs fleeing from Israel, who are not called Palestinians because that term is not used then, the Arab countries that absorb them will not absorb them. They keep them in refugee camps until today. They can't get like in like Lebanon or Syria. You can't get health benefits. You can't be employed by the government. There's all kinds of restrictions on these people until today. They're permanently left in the state of limbo to be used to make Israel look bad, where Israel will absorb hundreds of thousands of Jews from the Middle East who are refugees. And sometimes they're evacuated en masse. Sometimes they're taken out through subterfuge, like the Red Sea diving school. You seen that movie? About how they smuggled it. We're paying the Moroccans to buy Jews. They're smuggled out of Yemen. These are people who barely had shoes, Yemenite Jews. They end up being on planes and they've been taken to the land of Israel. We have all these different operations to absorb all of these Jews who pour back into, which is why Israel is so much more Edot to Mizrach. And in America, it's like 95% Ashkenazi. But in Europe was overwhelmingly Ashkenazi. And now in Israel, it's like 50-50 Sephardi. Almost all the Sephardic Jews, except in places like France, are living in the Middle East. But that's the big waves of Aliyah, which create that Sephardi community, which, by the way, suffers horribly under the labor governments, which are the governments that are in power from 48 till 1977. The Labor Party runs this country as one giant socialist octopus. The Labor Party never makes a government all by itself, which means you have 61 seats. They always have to make coalitions, but it's left-wing governments. You have the Histadrut Labor Fund, Histadrut Health Fund, Core Industries, United Kibbutz Movement. It's all one giant socialist octopus, which all went bankrupt, by the way. Because as Margaret Thatcher said, socialism works until you run out of other people's money. And when that happened, but they tended to treat, go read about the Black Panthers in Israel. Charlie Biton, he just passed away. My sister bought his house in Musrar, right over here. You go read about it was a Sephardi uprising movement against Ashkenazi, left-wing Ashkenazi oppression of the Sephardic Jewish people. It's a really interesting topic, how they were treated really, really badly and stuck in these development towns in the worst places and on the border with the Arabs. It's a whole other topic we cannot get into in detail. But you have this emigration. Look at October 20, 1956. Remember, King Farouk of Egypt is overthrown by Gamal Abdel Nasser. Gamal Abdel Nasser decides to, this is Arab nationalism. For a very short period of time, for 1 year, Syria and Egypt become one country. They have no common border, but they become one country together as the United Arab Republic. It doesn't last for very long, before the 67 war. But Syria and Egypt become one country. Yes, they unite for about a year. United Arab Republic, read about it. Okay? It doesn't last. But anyway, he takes over from King Farouk, and they nationalize the Suez Canal. The government takes over the Suez Canal. Now who doesn't like that? Who ran the Suez Canal before that? The British. So the British and the French get together with Israel, and with the U.S. is not involved in this. Eisenhower is furious, and they invade the Sinai. Israel invades the Sinai, takes the Sinai. They get to the Suez Canal. The America goes nuts. Big mistake, Eisenhower's part. Big mistake. America goes nuts. You got to pull out. Because America is a superpower. This is, the French, they were occupied by the Germans a few years before. The British, no more empire. So America's calling the shots. So Israel has to pull out of the Sinai. But meanwhile, the canal is no longer nationalized. It's opened up for free travel. Okay, in June 1st, 1962, Adolf Eichmann, the architect of the final solution, is kidnapped from Argentina. Really good story. Drugged and kidnapped. Tried in Israel, very traumatic. There's no TV in Israel yet, but everyone's listening. Israel's a huge percentage of Holocaust survivors listening to all these hundreds of witnesses talking about all the final solution, and he remains the only person hung. Would that we had a death penalty here? We could be very busy. Imagine we had a death penalty for terrorism. Unbelievable. We'd be very busy. Sorry, we should have it soon in our days. Believe me, believe me, believe me. But anyway, Eichmann is executed in 1962. In 1964, the PLO is founded. Now, what's happening here, by the way, is until this time, you guys know the Cold War, right? The Cold War is between what emerges, the new power structure of the world after World War I until 1980 to 1990 is the Soviet-backed countries, right? The Warsaw Pact versus the North Atlantic Treaty Alliance, NATO, which is basically America versus the Soviet Union. And these two countries are both nuclear superpowers. And nuclear superpowers can't fight wars directly. Why? Which is why you can't make Ukraine part of NATO, because if Ukraine is attacked by Russia, then they can trigger what's called Article 9, which means that NATO countries have to come to NATO, Ukraine's defense, which means you have nuclear powers fighting each other, which means you end up with what? MAD. What does MAD stand for? Mutually assured destruction. Because if they let the nuclear weapons go, what's left on the world after nuclear Armageddon? Rats, cockroaches, and lawyers, and everything else is destroyed. That's why New Jersey has so many toxic waste dump in Manhattan, has so many lawyers. New Jersey got first pick. Anyway, those are my lawyer jokes. But by this period of time in the 1960s, it's already America's emerging. Haha, Joe Biden, look again, as this becomes, the proxy. How did the Cold War, how were wars fought? This plays a big part in understanding the geopolitical reality of the last 50, 60 years. Proxy wars, Korean War, Vietnam War, Cuban Missile Crisis, and Arab-Israeli crisis from the Six-Day War, especially onward, are going to be proxy wars with the Soviet Union backing the Arab states or backing the North Koreans, or the Chinese backing the Koreans, backing the Cubans. And this is how we fight each other in little wars. So to create a counterclaim to the land of Israel and win some political mileage in the Middle East, the KGB, through the Romanian secret police and Nicolae Ceausescu in 1964, through a guy by the name of Ahmed Sukhari, will found the Palestine Liberation Organization. You get that? The PLO was founded by the KGB to create a counterclaim to the Jewish claim to the land of Israel, to reorient the conflict from teeny David, which is a country the size of New Jersey, fighting the Arab world, which is 5.5 million square miles of territory, which is a matchbox sitting in a football field, is the dimensions of Israel to the 22 states of the Arab League. Use that next time you're trying to explain the dimensions of Israel versus the 22 states of the Arab League. A matchbox in a football field to the mighty matchbox attacking like the Palestinians. Okay, but this is the founding of the PLO, and this is when things start to switch. But the big change in 1964, Israel's still the underdog. But then they tried to destroy us in 47 and 48 in the War of Independence, and we survived the war, but they ended up occupying all that territory. This is before there's any Israeli occupation of any territory. They try and launch an attack again. This time it's only 3 countries. What are the 3 countries? Egypt, Jordan, young King Hussein, and Syria attack Israel. And Israel preempts that by launching what is a brilliant pre-strike, taking out. The war starts actually when the Egyptians blockade the Straits of Tiran, which is Israel's exit to the Red Sea. If you blockade a country's port, what is that called in international law? Causes belly. It's an act of war. Israel then takes out the air force of all 3 of these countries, who are so bombastically stupid. The Egyptians are telling Jordanians, "We are bombing Tel Aviv." Meanwhile, their entire air force is destroyed. And in modern warfare, not asymmetrical warfare like in Gaza, where your enemies are hiding behind the civilians in tunnels, but when you have no more air cover, it's like a turkey shoot. Go look at the pictures of like 15 miles of destroyed Egyptian vehicles. It's like heaven for a warthog. You know what a warthog is? An A-10? Go watch one of those babies. Go watch YouTube, warthogs in action. It's got a cannon the size of a plane. The tank killer. Anyway, Israel doesn't have A-10s, but it was a turkey shoot. Israel ends up winning in 6 days, tripling its territory, trashing 3 Arab armies. By the way, see what happens. Levi Eshkol, immediately, who's the prime minister then, Ben Gurion is gone, and says, "We'll give it all back. Just make peace with us." The Arabs get together in Khartoum, September 1st, 1967. And what do they say? No peace with Israel, no negotiation with Israel, no recognition of Israel. Notice it's never been about establishing a Palestinian state. They've rejected every single offer, just like Hamas, because they want the whole thing. Okay, it's about destroying Israel. So you have the Khartoum Resolution. Now, look what happens. September 1967, under the Labor government, Kfar Etzion, which was established in the 1920s originally and fell the day before Israel became a state on May 13, 1948, is reestablished as a Jewish community. And then now there's the 24 communities out there. Alon Shvut, you know Alon Shvut, where Har Hatzon Yeshiva is? because there's an oak tree there that's 600 years old, which you could see from the border with Israel, look into the territory. We've returned to the oak. This is the beginning of the settlement movement, very messianic, the Gush Emunim movement. You guys heard of Gush Emunim, which is a cluster of the believers, which is the settlement movement of today, is founded because this was viewed as very messianic. Creation of state of Israel already is the rebirth of a Jewish state after 2,000 years. The reunification of Jerusalem with Harabayit B'Yadenu, sort of, the Temple Mount in our hands, kind of, maybe. By the way, in 67, they popped out, they hung an Israeli flag on the Gold Dome, and Moshe Dayan, you know that guy with the eye patch? Minister of Defense, you take that down, the Arabs are going to slaughter us, and all the Arabs are fleeing Judea and Samaria to try and get to Jordan. What does Moshe Dayan do? He runs out to the Allenby Bridge and says, no, please stay with us. I'm sorry, that was really stupid. Okay? He may have had only one eye, but he certainly saw nothing. No, I'm telling you, that was the dumbest move. Israel, during that fighting, we could have basically gotten rid of the vast majority of the Arab population, would have left. We did a population exchange. You threw out all your Jews, like India and Pakistan did in 1947, and okay, we'll just switch. Arabs go live in your 22 states, which is like much bigger than our little piece of real estate, and we'll take the Jews in here. And the Israeli Arabs who are still here can stay as citizens fine, but we could have solved the problem then. Anyway, guys, let's keep going. No. Not that I know of. Not that I know of. Look at this, November 20, 1967, UN Resolution 242. This is the most carefully worded UN resolution ever. This is the Land for Peace resolution that the Arabs are always quoting, and no one knows what it says. It doesn't say withdraw from all territories, because if you look on the map here, you can see what we end up with after 67. Look at that, guys. The Sinai is twice the size of Israel. When I first came to Israel in 82, we still had half the Sinai. Look at the territory we ended up with. Israel triples its territory. It's like huge. So the UN Resolution 242 is the most carefully worded resolution ever. It doesn't say withdrawal from all territories taken by Israel, because Israel is the only country in the world that fights wars it didn't start for its survival, wins the wars, and then is treated as if it's the aggressor and lost the war and has to give back territory. It's a standard only used for Israel in war. So you could argue that when Israel gave most of the territory back, which is what? The Sinai, we fulfilled 242. It doesn't say give back all territory. But this is the resolution and 338 that you always hear the Arabs screaming about. 242, 338, blah, 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 always talking about it. Okay, withdrawal from territories. That's the exact quote, not all the territories. September 5th, 1972, this is the Munich Olympics. When 11 Israeli athletes, they storm the Olympic Village. 11 Israeli athletes are taken prisoner. Several are killed at the initial storming of the village. And then stupidly, Israel said, can we please rescue our hostages? The Germans said, no, we will do it. And the shootout at the airport, they end up throwing hand grenades, the terrorists, into the helicopters and killing all of 11 athletes there. And the Olympics went on anyway. Okay, and then October 1973, here, look over it, October 6th, Yom Kippur War. Now this is now Israel, they say pride comes before the fall. This is when Israel got pretty arrogant, by the way. I can show you quotes from Ariel Sharon, who was a very cocky kind of guy, great general, brilliant guy, saying, when we get finished with the Arabs in 67, we thought we were going to get slaughtered, but Sharon was very cocky. We finished with these guys, for 3 generations, they won't even look at us. They'll be so scared. How many years is it from 1967 to 1973? Yeah. 6 years later, now they learned, the Arabs learned from the mistakes. Russia now is fully backing the Arab armies. Well, in this case, it's just Syria now. Went from 5 armies to 3 armies, now to 2 armies. Now it's Egypt in the south and Syria in the north. They spend a ton of money giving them the 2 things that Israel had the edge over, which is their armor and in the Air Force. They give them tons of anti-aircraft missiles and tons of wire-guided anti-tank missiles. So Israel had fortified the Bar-Lev line, which is the Suez Canal. One side of the Suez Canal controlled by with big sand embankment. The Egyptians are standing on the other side of the Suez Canal with fire hoses squirting down mounds of sand. What do you think they're practicing for? It's really amazing how arrogant and stupid Israel was. Just like on October 7th, we really got caught with our pants down. And people were warning Israel, they're going to attack, they're planning. Nasser's son, the president of Egypt's son-in-law, was an Israeli spy. Can you believe that? And he said they're going to attack you on Yom Kippur. So Israel, partially a little bit mobilized. 2 Arab armies attack, thinking that the Jews will be too busy. Love attacking us on our holy days. You notice that? Everyone's saying, Biden's saying, you can't attack them during Ramadan. Give me a friggin' break. That's the time when they most want to meet their virgins. By the way, there's always big spikes in suicide attacks at Ramadan because they're always feeling very hypoglycemic and very passionate. So it's a bad combination for attacking Israeli soldiers and doing crazy stuff. But, sorry? Because Russia, this is a proxy war. get Israel out. Is America's big ally, keeping American presence in the Middle East is primarily Israel there. So we get them out, then Russia could control the Middle East and the oil and the Suez Canal. It'll all be ours, and it'll be amazing. So anyway, initially Israel's completely caught Lilith's proverbial pants down. All the Israeli aircraft that think they're going to repeat what happened in 67 get shot out of the sky. The armor Israel figures out pretty quickly. I don't want to do a class on the 73 war. It's an amazing topic. But they punched through the Golan Heights. In the 73 war, the goal was not to destroy Israel. The Arabs never thought in a million years they would do that. Their goal was to grab a little territory back in the Sinai and grab something in the Golan Heights, which they had before 67 war. And then we'll negotiate from a point of strength. But then they had no plan to go further. So as soon as they achieved their initial goals and had to go further, the whole thing fell apart. And Israel ended up winning even bigger victory, not territorially, but there was Israeli armor on the way to Cairo and the way to Damascus. We could have taken Cairo and Damascus. And the Soviet Union was threatening to nuke Israel. But that came at a price. 67 war was 788 Israelis killed. Yom Kippur War, 2,500 plus Israelis died in Yom Kippur War. Much bigger casualty figure. But out of that, the Arabs, by the way, you have to understand when you're dealing with Arabs, an Arab victory is, I am still alive. I am missing arms and legs, but my heart is still beating, so I have one great victory. Which is why if Sinwar gets out of the battle with his head on his shoulders, with his heartbeat, he's going to be declaring a Hamas victory. Exactly. No, it's going to be like this because he only has one finger. It's like the Army engineer salute. They're missing the middle fingers. Anyway, no, seriously. So the Egyptians until today have a victory parade for 73 for crossing the Suez Canal and beating Israel initially in the opening days of the war. But look what happens. But because they got their honor back, look what happens, guys. You look at, here it is. We're getting through it now. Look, November 10th, 1975. The Useless Nothings gets together and does one of the most perfidious things they've ever done, which passes the Zionism is a form of racism resolution. The one and only time in the history of the UN to declare another country's national identity racist. It was the only bigger miracle was that in 1991 they got enough votes in the UN to rescind that. But then in July 4th, 1976, I remember this because this was the day of the bicentennial in America. This is when a flight was hijacked from Greece, supposed to land, was hijacked to Entebbe, in Uganda, Idi Amin. And this is called Operation Thunderbolt. When an operation of Israeli commandos, they did the blackface. Today they'd be condemned for that. Can you imagine that? Israeli commandos wear blackface to dress as Idi Amin to pretend to visit the base. And the UN condemns their racism. But they actually, I got a really interesting story today. The raid is led by Bibi Netanyahu's older brother, Yoni, who is an unbelievable human being. Had he lived, he was Bibi's hero, is Yoni. He was the only person killed who was shot in the neck by a sniper. They took the hostages out. They flew in C-140 transports. It's an amazing story. Operation Thunderbolt. Read all about it. It's a really great story. Okay, keep going. Okay, there's a big change. It's May 17, 1977. Menachem Begin and the Likud riding largely on a wave of Sephardi anger at the Labor Party, Ben-Gurion's party. He's no longer around him. But the Ashkenazi left-wing, total nasty treatment of the Sephardim. And they're much more traditional people anyway. And Begin was a much more traditional right-wing kind of conservative guy. They put the Likud in power for the first time. This is the first time that since the founding of the state, there's a right-wing government. By the way, it takes right-wing governments to give up territory. The left has given up nothing except Jericho. Every major territorial concession made by Israel is done under a right-wing government, whether it's Gaza. They're always doing this stuff. So as soon as the right-wing government gets in power, November 19th, 1977, Sadat, who took over after Nasser, Anwar Sadat, he comes to Israel. Now we have an honor badge. We can address the Jewish people. And he addresses the Knesset. And this is amazing. This is the first time. We're living for all this time with Arab countries that are at war with us. And then if you look at September 17, 1978, the Camp David Accords. This is Israel's first peace treaty with a neighbor. Imagine living in America and you're constantly at war with Mexico and Canada. Not that would last very long, but in the Mexican case, it would be the drug cartels. In the Canadian case, they have 7 soldiers, so the war would end quickly. But this is an amazing thing when it happened. But it was conditional on, again, Israel giving back territory to Egypt, and we'll make peace. And as much as it's been a cold peace, it was still a major breakthrough. And today, with the Sisi in power, today, it actually is very beneficial because if Israel had to maintain a large military force on its border, with Egypt, that would be very dangerous and very threatening given the size of the Egyptian army. So this is a huge turning point. This breaks the ice, the glass ceiling, so to speak, that will enable other countries, and this process is still going on until today. I forgot to put in a few things I should have put, like the Abraham Accords. I didn't put in here. I got to add that in. Guys, look to June 6, 1982. So we know the Palestine Liberation Organization was founded basically in 1964. Yasser Arafat, who takes over the organization, and they start launching terrorist attacks. They're involved in terrorism. By the way, the PLO from 60s is basically with the fall of the West Bank to the Israeli army in 1967. The PLO flees to Jordan. They try and destabilize Jordan. You guys heard of Black September? In September 1970, the Palestinian tries to take over Jordan. Jordan is an artificially created country whose population is the same as the Arabs here. And the Jordanians know how to deal with these things. What do the Jordanians do? They kill thousands of Palestinians and they eject them out of where? Jordan, and they go to where? Lebanon, and completely destabilize one of the most delicately balanced countries in the world, which is Maronite Christian, Druze, Shiite, Sunni. It's an unbelievably tricky place, Lebanon. And they start a civil war in Lebanon. They start killing the Christians. It's a total mess. And they basically move down to the border where Hezbollah is today, start firing missiles into Israel. And this is the same time they're doing terrorist attacks on Israel all the time. So in June 6, 1982, I was here for this. This is my first war experience in Israel. June 6th, I actually flew to France on the day the war started. I was taking a vacation with my brother who was flying back to America. And I noticed it's kind of weird that we're landing at the airport in Paris and a tank is escorting the El Al plane down. So why do you have a tank escorting us? Because the war had started and we're always in danger of being attacked. So Israel invades Lebanon. It was supposed to be a short in and out thing, and Israel gets stuck in Lebanon until the year 2000. Because we set up a buffer zone. We get rid of the PLO, who's allowed to flee. And they go to Tunisia and whatever. And then we invite him back into Israel. What a bunch of idiots. And we end up with a buffer zone in South Lebanon, creating a South Lebanese Phalange Christian army, which, by the way, in September 16th, 1982, they go in Sabra and Shatila, which are two Palestinian, the only people at permanent refugee camps, and they kill a lot of Palestinians in revenge for all the horrible things the PLO had done to the Phalange Christians when they invaded Lebanon and started the civil war there. November 21st, 1984, guys, fast forward here. So we keep a buffer zone there until the year 2000. This is really military presence in Lebanese territory. But November 21st, 1984, Operation Moses. This is when he bring 8,000 Ethiopians are rescued. Fast forward to 1987. This is the first intifada, which was an intifada where they're basically throwing rocks and stabbing people. But this begins in December 9, 1987. It's the first Arab uprising. You see them screaming in the streets, globalize the intifada. It means to shake off filth. That's how they view us. We've got to get rid of the occupation. Because by this point, the alternative narrative has now been well established since the founding of the PLO, the reorienting of the story, that we are the foreign occupiers, that they're the indigenous population. This is all being taken hold now. And now they're liberating Palestine from Zionist Jewish occupation. January 18th, 1991. This is when Saddam Hussein starts launching missiles into Israel. I remember when this happened. This was scary. It's the first missile attacks. This is before. We did have Patriot missiles to intercept them, but we were scary. We thought we were getting chemical weapons. 39 missiles were launched, most of them hitting Tel Aviv, causing one casualty. The only guy killed was the guy who is the unofficial pig farmer in Isn't that weird? I have a picture of a Scud missile hitting this guy's house. It's the cover. A friend of mine wrote a book called Missiles, Massacre, and Miracles. His house is hit by a Scud missile. The entire house, which is a 3-floor villa, collapses around him. He's standing with the roof collapsed around him with his head sticking out through a hole in the roof with not a scratch on his face. It's an amazing photograph. It's like a supernatural photograph. Of course, Israel, America, this is when they organized the coalition to go after Saddam Hussein, and they asked Israel to stay out of it and not respond, which in my opinion, it's going to jeopardize the coalition if you defend yourself. Big mistake, in my opinion. May 24th, 1991, Operation Solomon. This is when they go and take out 14,300 Ethiopian Jews are rescued. This is one of the last big campaigns to bring Jews. We had a guy, by the way, in 1987, we had a doctor in Eshet Torah who spoke Amharic. Rick Hodes is his name. I remember they took him out in the middle of 1987 to be, because you need Amharic speaking Ashkenazi doctor. Amharic is the language they speak in Ethiopia. He's still there. He never got married. He's adopted, I think, 19 Ethiopian kids. If you go to Addis Ababa, you can go visit him there. He's still there, being a very hospitable guy, Rick Hodes. Anyway, guys, so December 25th, 1991, we have the Soviet Union officially collapses. Until that time, Jews in the Soviet Union were persecuted, not allowed out. They had the good old days when we could pick on the Soviet Union for oppressing Jews. This is the last time we were considered victims by anyone in the world. And this triggers a mass aliyah where 1 million people of Jewish ancestry, of whom a third are, by the way, halakhically not Jewish, because the law to get citizenship in Israel, the law of return is not based on halachic definition of who's a Jew. It's based on Hitler's definition of who we persecute for being Jewish, which is what? If you have one first-degree relative as a grandparent, my father's father is Jewish. I'm not halakhically Jewish, but I can come to Israel. I'm not considered Jewish by the Ministry of the Interior, but I can get Israeli citizenship. So now we have over 300,000 Jews. By the way, the ones that are named, Goldstein and Schwartz are the Jews that are ones with the ones that are the non-Jews, because they're the ones with the Jewish fathers and the Russian mothers. A lot of them, the ones with the real Russian-sounding last names are the ones who are probably the Jewish ones, because their mothers are the Jewish ones and their fathers are not. You see that a lot. It's very common. Just like I saw a birthright group 2 years ago. I see this Chinese girl, and it says Sarah Cohen. Anyway, maybe it's like Whoopi Goldberg. We should sue her for cultural appropriation. Ridiculous woman. I'll slap her. Anyway, okay, guys, let's keep going. Get to the end. I only have a few more minutes. Let's get to the end here. That's the last major events here. September 13th, 1993, we had the Oslo Accords signed with the PLO. The PLO is on its last leg, hanging out in Tunisia with nothing left of it, having been thrown out. And we go and invite them back into Israel. I had the bumper sticker on my car. Why did we give them guns? We invite them back. We let them settle in. It's like, sure, let's have Nazis move back into Germany afterwards. Ridiculous thing. This was crazy stuff going on. We have these Oslo Accords, which are supposed to lead to a final status of a creation of an independent Palestinian state, which has never happened until then. Why, guys? Because every offer made by Israel since then, they have rejected, because like I said before, it's never been about the creation of a Palestinian state. It's always been about them wanting to destroy the Jewish state. So this is 1993. I remember when they signed this, I lived in Givat Zev. The Arabs came in truckloads, waving flags, driving through our neighborhoods. We had no security barrier then, and pointing out the houses where they're going to live. They had a victory parade through Givat Zev. Unbelievable. And the next night we set up an illegal settlement across the hill, which the border police came and tore down 24 hours later. But I was very much involved in the Zohar Tzenu movement at the time to try and counteract the crazy Oslo peace accords, which led to a lot of political strife in Israel, because already there's well-established settlements all throughout the land of Israel, all in what is the biblical heartland of Judea and Samaria, which is where they were trying to set aside for Jewish territory. Let's keep going, guys. We have, okay, look, it says, look, here it is. October 26, 1994, Jordan, King Hussein, the father of the current king, signs a peace treaty with Yitzhak Rabin. This was a big deal. This was really, and Jordanians were pretty, King Hussein, I've done the army a lot on the Egyptian border, Jordanian border, Gaza border. Jordanian soldiers were much better than the Egyptian ones. That's the peace treaty is actually established November 4th, 1995. Then starting in February 1996, having invited them back in and given them weapons, they start to blow themselves up. And this is when all the bombing starts. And by this point, look at November 4th, 1995. This is when Yitzhak Rabin is assassinated by Yigal Amir. Supposedly, there's some conspiracy theories around that we're not going to get into now. But this was out of anger for what he didn't want to do it, by the way. You ever seen the picture of Rabin shaking Arafat's hand? Look at the picture of Rabin shaking King Hussein's hand with Clinton there. And the three of them look really happy. Look at the picture of Yasser Arafat, who's the smarmiest, most disgusting human being since Adolf Hitler, biggest hater. Now, Sinwar probably could take that title now. But this guy has more Jewish blood in his hands than almost anyone since the Holocaust. He's got this disgusting smile on his face. Rabin looks like he wants to die in the picture. And Clinton's sitting there going, here comes my Nobel Prize. And God's saying, no, here comes Monica Lewinsky. But anyway. But it was an unbelievable picture. But so we have a peace treaty with Jordan. Rabin is assassinated out of anger for what he did, letting the suicide bombers and the terrorists back in. In 1996, Bibi becomes prime minister for the first time. In 2000, when Bibi's already out of power, during the time of Ehud Barak as prime minister, Israel pulls out of the South Lebanon. That's where you're shaking your head. You pull out of the South Lebanon security zone. The South Lebanese army collapses within 1 day. And then who takes over the buffer zone? Hezbollah. who, by the way, the Shiites, when Israel came in 1982, the Shiites were throwing rice at the Israeli tanks. And because they hate each other. Shiites and Sunni. The Shiites hated the Palestinian Liberation Organization. And we stayed there too long, and then they became crazy, and Hezbollah and all these different guys, and Amal and all these. Anyway, Lebanon withdrawal 2000. Now the UN actually recognized that Israel withdrawing to its international border. July 25th, 2000, we have the second intifada begins. And this is the one when they're using the bomb factory, and Jenin becomes a giant bomb factory, and they start blowing themselves up everywhere in Israel. I know 6 people killed between 2000 and 2003, 5 blown up, 1 shot. It was horrible what was going on here. There's still plaques all up and down Jaffa Road. These 6 people, every day, someone blowing themselves up. And this Spiro Pizza, the place is killed. Unbelievable how bad it was. And because of that, we went, this is during the second intifada, which goes until 2005. First of all, we have Operation Defensive Shield, which is the last time I was in the Army. That's how long I've been out of the Army. We went into Jenin to clean out. In the end, this is what we did, what we should do in the rest of Gaza, what they did in Jenin. In the end, when they didn't want to go into the Kasbah, they just brought in my favorite vehicle in Israel, which is not a Merkava tank. It's a D9 bulldozer, which is just a destruction machine. You always have a parking lot space when you have a D9 bulldozer. And they just bulldozed the Kasbah in, and that kind of ended. They just went in because the only thing that stops terrorism is offensively, not walls, and because they all start building. Look, in June 23rd, 19, they start building a security barrier, which is still not completed yet, and there's lots of holes in it. And defensive barriers never work. If you don't believe me, ask the French in the Maginot Line. But they start to build this wall, which, by the way, is 97% of it is just a chain link fence with sensors and cameras on it. Only 3% of it is this concrete barrier, which they love to film themselves in front of the Arabs to make it look, you're keeping us in a giant concentration camp prison with 40-foot high concrete prison walls. Most of it is just an open fence. And it's designed not to keep them in, but every country's first responsibility is the safety and security of its citizens. And when there's no fences there, along with all the Arab workers coming to work in places like Netanya, suicide bombers would walk in and blow themselves up. Like that picture I had also with Ahmed's suicide bomber school, and the teacher's there with the belt on. He said to the students, pay attention, I'm only going to do this once. Okay, August 15, 2005, Gaza withdrawal. Oh my God, this is the beginning of all the problems. Now this is Ariel Sharon, who is former Minister of Defense, and he gave us this building for 1 shekel when he was Minister of Housing. To his credit, he did some good stuff. But, and I know someone knew him well. He said, you know what we're going to do? We're going to give a piece of real estate we could afford to give them. We'll let them have it. They'll make a mess out of it. And then we can show them, see, they can't run anything, and then we'll unilaterally declare our borders and call the peace process over. The problem is the world has endless amounts of patience for them slaughtering us and lying and cheating and not fulfilling their sides and still backing them. But Israel, in 2005, we destroyed 21 settlements. I used to go in there, the Neve Dekalim. I used to go in there and escort the convoys when I was in the army. There were such beautiful places. We pulled the Jews out, destroyed a lot of the houses, gave all the greenhouses and all the agriculture to the Arabs there. What did they do? They destroyed all of it, took it over, and then the Palestinian Authority had elections, which, by the way, Hamas won, and then the Palestinian Authority ignored it. Then they had a civil war in Gaza in 2000. They had a civil war in Gaza in 2006, where Hamas threw the Palestinian Authority and killed most of them. You can see videos of them. They took the Hamas guys, they tied their hands behind their backs, they threw them off buildings. They're killing each other. And then, this is, by the way, the same time as you have the Second Lebanon War. This is all happening at the same time. Second Lebanon War. This, by the way, caused the Likud party to fall apart. Because the Likud party said, we're not backing you destroying Jewish settlement. What a dangerous precedent. We already did it in Yamit when we gave the Sinai back to Egypt. They destroyed Jewish communities back then. Once you set that precedent, like once you trade 1 living Jew for 1,000 terrorists, that's how the negotiations are going to begin. In the Middle East, you never offer stuff up. Here's our opening bargain point. You give us everyone or we nuke you. That should be the opening bargaining point. But anyway, that's why Atzkaz Ashkenazim were always negotiating. If we let a couple of Moroccans and Iraqis, Jews negotiate for us, we'd have the hostages back already. But so Gaza, so we had the Second Lebanon War in 2006. This is before we had Iron Dome, by the way. So we're having problems from Gaza and from Lebanon. In 2007, Hamas has seized control of Gaza. So now we do have a 2-state solution. We have Fatahstan over here and Hamastan in Gaza. We have 2 separate Palestinian entities running 2 different separate countries that hate each other. Do you know that Abbas is in like the 17th year of his 4-year term? They never hold elections because they know if they do, he's never going to get reelected, and Hamas is going to win in the West Bank. if they have such things. So in 2008, we have Operation Cast Lead, because as soon as Hamas takes over Gaza, what do they start doing? Now there's no more. We had military presence inside. Like when I was in the army, they occasionally would shoot like a little mortar, but they couldn't set up tunnels or anything like that. As soon as we pull out, they just take all the foreign aid they're getting and start turning it into a giant military camp with tunnels and passages and missile launches, which gets more and more sophisticated as time goes on. So in 2008, my oldest son, who was in the army as doing his regular military service, he was a sniper and a medic in the paratroopers. Isn't that a great combination of jobs, sniper and medic? He was in Gaza fighting in that war, 2009. That's after they launched 1,000 missiles and rockets into Israel. Israel went to try and clean it out. We had a 3-week military campaign. And then in 2014, we had Operation Pillar of Defense, which was an 8-day little mini Gaza war. Then we had in June 2014, we had the teens kidnapped. That's the famous thing at Gush Etzion at the end, and they murdered them. And that's going to trigger, we're going to have Operation Protective Edge, which that starts July 8th and ends on August 26th. That's my second oldest son, who was a combat medic in Golani, did 38 days as a medic with Golani in that war. The first kid killed was my neighbor's son, Dvir Manuelov, in that war. I remember going to the funeral. So we have these little wars. We'd never go in and finish it off, and now that's going on, the conflict. But then you have July 2014, the stabbing intifada, when they were just like stabbing people everywhere on trains and cars were stopping. Let's ram into people, jump out and stab some people. Now I left out of here. You see, December 6, 2017. This is the last few events to touch on. This is when Trump becomes president. And Trump is the engineer of a lot of people. He's an anti-Semite. I said, are you kidding? He's the only president who has Shomer Shabbat grandchildren. But the guy was unbelievable what he did. He said he's going to move the U.S. embassy. That was voted on by the United States in 1993. And every president, every 6 months from 1993 onward, signed a 6-month waiver on it. We're not going to go push it off. And Trump said he's not going to do it. He did it right away. He kept exactly to his word. But Trump becomes president in 2017. The U.S. recognizes Jerusalem as its capital, which is something that the UN Security Council demanded, that every country remove its embassy from Jerusalem because Israel has no right to control Jerusalem. And the U.S. goes back, the biggest player in the world as a superpower, and establishes its embassy, which opened on May 14th, 2018. Okay, and then they recognize Israeli sovereignty of the Golan Heights, which is technically Syrian territory, which used to shoot rockets on us from. They even built like a Trump town there in honor of Donald Trump. And then he goes and engineers, it's not in here, but engineers the Abraham Accords, which is peace between UAE, Bahrain. Unbelievable. So Israel now has peace treaties with all these different countries they were never at war with. And we were right on the cusp of doing what? And one of the triggers for probably what triggered what happened October 7th is what? Yeah, because normalization of Saudi Arabia is game over for the Arab-Israeli conflict. Not that Iran is going to want to keep trying to destroy us. That doesn't count. But in terms of getting the biggest player financially in the Middle East, which is the Saudis, on our side, no one cares about the Palestinians really anyway. It's the game changer. So it could be that Iran and Saudi Arabia that hate each other. If not now, when? We better do it now. But that's what led to the October 7th, 2023 Hamas attack on Gaza. So guys, we ran through a lot of stuff. It was really quick. There's a lot more to do in there, but we've had quite an intense history, right? There's a lot going on here. And yet Israel is rated as some of the happiest, most optimistic people in the world with some of the longest life expectancy on the planet Earth. Thus proving what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. We should be zoche to be killing the guys in Gaza over there and be stronger here. Okay. Guys, thank you very much.